Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show. This week we have with us my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Salyer. Now, I've known Gary for a long time. He primarily works in the relationship space with individuals and with couples around their romance and relationship. But every time we would talk, particularly around some of the foundational work in his world, which are around these rights, the 6 rights that every human must have installed to be fully functioning, I kept seeing issues that showed up in people's entrepreneurial worlds, in their leadership worlds. And so often I find that people try to fix a problem that isn't really the problem that needs fixing, and it's what prolongs it. And I wanted to have Gary on to share his perspective on these rights so that you could see, is some of the places that maybe I'm struggling in my business or in my leadership actually a result of not having one of these rights, quote unquote, installed? And what do I do about it? So Dr. Gary Salyer is a transformational relationship mentor. For the last decade, he's been in private practice offering singles and couples heart-centered transformations so they can rewrite the rules for love in their brains and create a love that lasts. Dr. Gary speaks to national audiences and is a featured expert on many TV and radio shows such as Hay House Radio, Coast to Coast AM. He's the author of a groundbreaking book, Safe to Love Again, How to Release the Pain of the Past Relationships and Create the Love You Deserve. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary Salyer. Gary Salyer.
Jeffrey Van Dyke. Hey, man. This
It
is
is
great.
so good to have you here.
Yes.
There's so much ground I want to cover in this conversation. But before we get into that, tell us just a little bit about your work, what you do, what you got into it, and we'll go from there.
Well, I call myself a transformational relationship mentor. And it's transformation. It's about helping neurons in the brain make better connections, more loving connections. It's about, and I'm well versed in attachment theory, which is basically the science of how your brain gets wired to love and be loved. And it's about helping us to reclaim what's called a secure love style. Because you can do all the coaching you want to, you can give people all the skills, but if they don't have the neurological wiring, if they don't have the innate feelings in their brain that support those skills, then all the bets are off. So I go deeper than just skills and coaching. It's about getting a brain to feel safe with the notion of being loved and loving someone else. Because a lot of us weren't always given the message that it's all that safe.
Yeah. What strikes me, I know a lot of your work is with couples and kind of in the more traditional relationship frame. But what strikes me in hearing you say that is a lot of people that go into, say, being a thought leader or moving in that direction or being a paradigm changer, having impact in the world. One of the unconscious drives I often see is, if I have that kind of impact, then I'll matter. And if I matter, then I'll be loved. Right?
Yeah.
That it's a substitute on some unconscious level for, am I innately loved, lovable, loving?
Yeah.
Or do I have to work to prove my lovability, for example?
Yes.
So let's go in here, because I know this is one of the places that has just fascinated me as it relates. You do this work around these rights and relationship, but it's really fascinated me in terms of entrepreneurs, leaders, their relationship to success and power and impact and whatnot, which is this concept of rights.
Hmm.
Uh, in rights as in rites of passage, that word. So share with me just a little bit about this work around rights. Where did it come from? What is it? And then let's go through the rights.
Okay. When I talk about rights, I'm talking about the neurological wiring we get usually earlier in life or by later experience can also count that allows us to create or not create certain experiences. So we could call them permission slips too, but they're rights.
Mm.
I'm dependent upon neo-Reichian developmental psychology for this concept. Reich originally called it bioenergetics. That he began to realize that how we're wired up here shows up in our body's musculature and how we hold ourselves. And it was bioenergetic. And then some of his later students like Lowen and others, Robert M. Johnson, they began to come across, solidify his work and realize that what he's talking about are rights, R-I-G-H-T-S. Rights that allow us to have certain experiences or not, and that between 0 and 3 especially, certainly 0 and 7, the brain is literally wired or not wired to create experience. Now that's important because subsequent to all that research, we know from neuroscience now that the brain comes out of the womb 28 to 40% developed. So it's literally experience that is telling the gene code epigenetically how to spin out the genes.
Hmm.
And between 0 and 2 months, we're given a right to exist. And this isn't a perfect world, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're welcomed with joy, and we have a right to be in our body, that the world is a cozy oyster. And it feels good. We don't, and we don't have to live from our heads up. There's also a right to have your needs met, to reach out and to know you're worthy of an attuned response, not just give, but to be able to reach out and take as well as to give. There's a right to
And this is
separate. Go ahead.
so this is separate from the right to exist.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So first is the right to exist, and this is foundational.
Yes. Very foundational. That was one of my
Got it.
missing rights. And
Got
if
it.
you
So
if
we
you
have
don't
that
have that
one.
when you live in your head, or you tend to be super spiritual and have a spiritual bypass to life.
Right. So you kind of float out in never land and you're not in your body.
Exactly. And you're really in
Yeah.
your head, and you have to validate yourself by thinking. Because
Okay.
if you're not welcomed, then at that age, the brain cannot make a distinction between the unwelcome, or the Reichians call it the hated child, and the hatred is in me. The hatred is me. So the only way to tone down that rejection is to float above your body and to be in your head, because all of our emotions, remember, are embodied. So the only way to tame down all those raging, rejecting feelings is to tone down the access to the body, tone down access to feelings. And it's a way of the baby learning, putting away a right to exist like an away plan to when it's safer later on. All these rights are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and I had that. I mean, you could have predicted, a professor, given the fact that I wasn't even named for 3 weeks. My mother was so disappointed not having a girl that it took a visit from the police, the state sheriff, I guess, to tell her that either she could name me or they'd find a place where she would have all the time in the world to think about it.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first right we get. And this is, if this one falls, most of the other ones fall later on because it's developmental. 2 to 6 months, the big right is, can we have our needs met? We get attuned responses that tell us to feel worthy. Then there's the right to separate and belong as soon as the baby learns how to walk. Now, one day they realized, before this, they thought, well, me and mom, me and dad, we're one. And then one day they realized, well, wait a minute, I'm over here and they're over there. I'm a me.
And I got myself over here.
Yeah, I got myself over here. So then it becomes, but they know they're vulnerable. They know they need protection. So it's the right to separate and go out and do your thing and to have your successes, right, and to come home to the home port of someone's heart, where someone has your back, where someone, is, the safety net and the high wire act of all of your aspirations. This is really key for entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And after that, from 12 to 24 months, two rights come in. A right to create your own experience where somebody else doesn't get to be the standard of your experience. You get to create your own experience. Then there's a right to assert, which is both to have a voice and to be a choice. This is another big one for most thought leaders and people who want to create something big. And between 24 and 36 months, we get a right to love and be loved back, which is what you were just talking about. If you have to have a raving fan club in order to prove your worth, you're on a treadmill. This isn't love. That's unworthy, carefully disguised as a raving fan club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those six rights create a secure love style. And anything that didn't give you the feelings of welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered so that you can have these rights, then we get missing rights, like not a right, more right to separate than to belong, or not a right to have my needs, but I can't create my own experience. And then we're off to the race with all sorts of adaptive strategies. What you
Yeah.
would call a wound.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So I want to dive into these because every time we talk about these,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of blow me away because I see them left, right,
Yeah.
and center in the people I work with, right? Uh, if I don't have the right to exist, for example, right? I don't have a right to be here.
Yes.
Early on, when I started doing work, I noticed all these spiritual type people who would say they wanted to start a business or run a business or grow their business.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually got to work helping them do it, they would either do nothing or sabotage it.
Yes.
And I was like, what is going on here? And it's like, oh, money, a business is here. It's on the earth.
Yes.
And they don't want to be here. Or now in this language, it'd say, oh, they don't have a right to be here.
Exactly.
So,
Go ahead. I mean, when I first started out, I kept doing notes, taking notes from more and more seminars. I went to your spiritual marketing, tons of notes, not so much getting in action, but lots and lots of learning.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So let's go through these one at a time
Okay. Let's
from
do it.
a leadership, entrepreneurism lens,
Mhm.
both the impact of not having the right and how one installs the right.
Okay.
So the right to exist, foundational. If you
Mhm.
can't be here, good luck showing up, let alone having impact,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the ways you see this showing up in people's lives, especially as it relates to their leadership and impact in the world?
If you don't have a right to exist, then you've gotten that feeling of unwelcome.
Uh-huh.
And what I've kind of noticed is if you get into thought leadership, these are the ones that have a huge left brain shift. They may be very good with research, but not so much with integrated feelings. Now, remember, how do we empathize with people? Our mirror neurons notice an intentional action. It has to be something intentional, like if I were to do this, drink a cup of sip out of my tea, your mirror neuron sees something intentional that just didn't happen randomly, and then it goes in and it checks in with your body from the storehouse of memories and experiences. Says, oh, that looks like thirst. I'll bet Gary's thirsty. And what happens if you fled up into above your neck? You don't have access to the database. You're like a computer that can't connect to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It can't get to the dampdatabase. So these
So
people
how does
they'll just struggle really creating heartfelt stories or empathizing or really connecting with their people. It'll be great knowledge, but not great connection.
So it seems to me that there may be two versions of these at least,
Yeah.
two examples, if you will. One, you mentioned the professor,
Yes.
right? The kind of neck up, lots of knowledge, traditional knowledge, book knowledge, etc. Could it also be I'm out here in 5D land, I'm in like, and I have all this knowledge about, I don't know, star beings, right? Some other, but again, I can't really connect with people with empathy, with heart here in real time.
Oh, there's two ways: intellectual, but also spiritual. It's
Okay.
easier to love the angels and guides, and if you get in a relationship, you tend to every 3 months got to go off and tone down the relationship by going off and being an ashram. I once worked with a couple in which she had a missing right to exist. And the way it sounds is she comes into this session at first, she goes, "Well, I have an issue, Gary." She goes, I kind of feel like my vortex is in a quantum flux with his vortex. And I don't think at a quantum level we are manifesting this. There's this vortexual problem. And after about 2 minutes, I don't have a clue what she's talking about. He has the whole problem of, oh my God, I have to solve the quantum universe to be able to save my marriage. And I
Right.
finally said, "Well, how would a 5-year-old say that?" And she
Uh-huh.
goes, "I just want a playmate." No.
Yeah.
So that's what a
Yeah.
spiritual bypass would look like. She's very smart, very spiritual,
Uh-huh.
and getting her into her body, getting her down there grounded like a 4 or 5-year-old.
Yeah.
That's the way. Now, this keeps her from her feelings. The immediate thought was, yeah, if I'm over here thinking, I'm not over here in my right brain feeling. And most attachment is basically more right brain. If you can't access that, you're kind of up a creek. So it creates entrepreneurs who are really, really good at the thought part, but maybe not so much the leadership part because it takes connection to lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
What good is
The
knowledge
other
if you
thing
don't
I
understand
see
the heart? Yeah.
oftentimes in communication, right, which is kind of my realm, is if they are communicating, that's an if,
Yeah.
uh, the communication they create is so heady that no one connects with it. And then they go, why isn't my messaging working? Why isn't anybody clicking or following or
Yes.
interested in what I have to say? And I look at it and I go to sleep
Exactly.
because there's no humanity in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting them
Um,
into their body, it's got to be an embodiable message for it to
yeah.
connect.
Let's go to the next one. The right to get your needs met.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. I knew I said we'll talk about each one and talk about how to install the right. So, right to exist. How does one install the right to exist if it's a missing right?
If you have that missing right, I mean, there's a lot of technical things in one-on-one work. You have to really go back and find the memories. And if you can't find the exact memory since it's so early, a lot of times people do remember I wasn't welcomed. You may go with a family story, and you have to go back, find out what flavor of safety they were seeking when they first gave up the right to exist. And it can vary what the flavor of
The
safety is.
baby.
Yeah, the baby. Yeah. And you
Uh-huh.
can, and then you add in, and then you, by various techniques, have to, when they're feeling on that welcome, start adding in the feeling of welcome. Sometimes I have literally had them wait outside the womb waiting. There's all sorts of techniques, but you have to add in. Like, for instance, one woman came to me and she had been a twin and a missing right to exist because the other twin had the umbilical cord wrapped around the neck and died, and then she was the survivor. So she feels like death is waiting in the wings all the time, so she doesn't have a right to exist. There's survival guilt, but life is not a welcoming place. God.
Hmm.
Now, interesting, it was almost like her soul waited to this moment. She waits till she's like 7.5 months pregnant and realizes that if she passes this down to her child, that's the next thing. So she comes, says, I've got to fix this in the next 6 weeks, which is no
Get
pressure.
to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. And we took her back, and there was a lot of resistance because, it happened in the womb. This right to exist can happen up to about 2 months before. And now this is how adding research, we find out the exact flavor, and then at one I'm looking, and her system really is fighting this gift of life because some part of her had to fight it way back then. And I look at her and I see this big tummy. I'm literally right beside her, and I go, oh, I'm just curious. Is your baby safe in the womb? She goes, oh, very. And I said, touch her tummy and take that back to the little one.
Mm-hmm.
Changed her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful.
She had the
Got
resource within her. It was just labeled as safe only for a child. Now, obviously, with others, I didn't have that resource, and it might not have worked, right? But those are the sort of things that if there's more to the technique than that when that feeling lit up in her, now we can take about what wires together, fires together, what fires together, wires together. So we wait to that moment, and the brain goes, wait a minute, did I have a memory and did I have a feeling? And then it starts rewiring. I wouldn't try doing this on yourself if you're listening out there. But with great care, this can be done. It's all adding the resources, adding the feelings back then. It's called re-imprinting.
Got it.
There's other things. You can do parts work sometimes to do it. There's a lot of different ways. But that's one of the keys. You got to give the feeling of welcomed with joy.
I love that. Welcomed with joy.
That's I learned over the years. Yes, go ahead.
Hearing those words, welcomed with joy, I sit with that and I go, well, of course. Isn't that what we all want? So foundational to be welcomed with joy. And I would have a right to exist if I were welcomed with joy. Yeah, beautiful.
It took me a while to realize that all the clients with that missing right, that was the feeling that healed them. And then, of course, I said, duh.
Right.
We want, what everybody wants is when you're born is to have, parents that go, oh, there's little Jeffrey, so good to have you. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we want to feel. And it's the gateway for love. People underestimate the power of welcoming.
I wonder if this was missing for me for a good portion. When I was born, my mother had some medical issues after I was born, was rushed back to the hospital, was there for weeks.
Yeah.
And I was with a neighbor for the first few weeks of my life, right? And that sense of belonging and creating belonging and finding my place in the world, having a place in the world, has taken a lot of work in my life. And this right to exist, fortunately at this point in my life, I'm like, oh, I have a place in this world. But for many years, I don't think I felt that way. And I think it had a real impact on my journey and my work in the world.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt, Jeffrey, that if you were separated from your mother the first 2 weeks, we now know in neonatal care that you make sure that baby's being touched. And that's why we now know it's the best thing is to put them on, the mother's breast, right? I mean, that to hear that heartbeat of that connection they've heard. Oh no, I've heard multiple instances of, sometimes parents get it naturally. If she gets sick, gets taken away, been in a car accident. An absent mother is just as dangerous as one that doesn't like you for whatever reason. All these are just natural ways we all come by missing a few permission slips to be the messengers that we want to be.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one, the right to have your needs met.
Yeah.
How does this show up in people's lives?
It shows up as one is usually as someone who gives and gives and gives and gives and gives until they are the resentful giver. And you can get it by, and sometimes it shows up physiologically. People, I had one client that was anemic and no one could explain it because her body was imitating the missing right. And so you wind up being with takers. Occasionally it can get reversed where you take, but most people it's that resentful giver. And it shows up in the business world as people that can't charge their value. People that are always giving away freebies, that give away
Uh,
just too much without, yes.
I'm having a particular person come to mind, a colleague of mine,
Yes.
and I remember talking with her about her work, which is extraordinary, and I asked her what she charged for a particular thing she was doing, and she told me the number. I was like, "Are you kidding me? Uh,
Yeah.
like, no, that gets doubled today." Um, and so she did. She doubled it. But then she doubled the amount of work she was doing for people for the same for
Yes.
the new amount. And I was like, no, that's not the point of this one. Um, so would that perhaps fit into uh, the right to have my needs met?
Yes, that would. That's classic. And there's so many messages. You can get unworthy. I mean, we have a culture that's just creating an epidemic of unworthiness, from the snarkiness on social media just to the hyper criticism. I remember once being on stage with a love coach, and they had a bachelorette on stage. Oh, that was part of the panel. And one of the love coaches in the back green room said, "Wow, I think she's got 5 pounds extra." And I remember thinking, how this is the stuff that gives women body images, right? And I mean, we get so much hyper sensationalism, being perfect, um, and we're not allowed to, and we feel guilty
How
asking.
does that how does that relate to getting our needs met?
Well, I think it's the epidemic of unworthiness. There's also the feeling unworthy people tend to be constantly working and working and working on themselves, trying to prove themselves. The healing feeling is worthy. When you feel the missing feeling of unworthy, undeserving, you know you're in the ballpark of a missing right to have your needs met. And it can be, or they just attract takers. Or are they people
Hmm.
that just, or people that really couldn't give to them where they've got to help out? Sometimes it works into the savior complex. Let me see if I can help this person out. Even if, there's always some element of not a full exchange to be able to come back. Or if someone does try to give, they won't fully take it in. Like
Hmm.
the couple I work with, both psychologists, and he said, "What do you do when your partner thinks she has no needs?" He kept trying to give and was resentful that he couldn't give to her. So it's
Yeah.
all about this, you know, uh, life needs reciprocity, give and take
Hmm.
in a relationship. And, uh, for thought leaders, it's, am I giving, but are you able to take back from people? Are you able to
Yeah.
receive the fullness of what their thoughts are and to really be in a nutrient rich thought instead of just constantly giving and giving and giving?
Yeah.
There comes a time when
Yeah.
you need to be able to step back and say, it's time for me to receive a little more so I can give a
Hmm.
little more. So, not being
Hmm.
like, I mean, once I had the first time I ever had fruit trees, I thought it was like every other tree. You didn't have to water them, but you did. And the first year I got these shriveled up pears, and I asked the neighbor what I do wrong. He says, "Did you water them?" You get the shriveled fruit. And if you want to give juicy, luscious fruit to the world, then you have to be able to receive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me think of a colleague. There's a few colleagues I have in my life where we use each other in support, right?
Mhm.
And something's up for me, I reach out. Something's up for them, they reach out. But there's one person in particular would never reach out to me. I was
Mm.
always happy to support me, right?
Yeah.
Um, as colleagues, not paying clients.
Mhm.
And at one point, I just asked the person, I'm like, hey, I don't get it. Why do you never, like, I'm here. I make overtures to be a support to you as well, but it doesn't ever seem to happen. Uh, and eventually kind of let that relationship fade because I'm like, this doesn't feel good to only be on the receiving end. Um,
No. You feel
yeah,
guilty because
yeah,
we're hardwired as primates to give and receive. And one of the things about not only is it tend to be controlling giving, controlling helpfulness, but it tends to be rude behavior because you make the other person feel guilty.
hmm,
You can build, you can have a relationship in which the partner who's not allowed to give feels, not only rejected, but guilty. And then, of course, you get into the races of a lot of disharmony. Yes, that's
yeah,
exactly the other thing. It's not only their inability to give, they're over giving, but they won't receive either.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know also in my business, there's times when I start feeling resentful from the amount of things I might do for my audience.
Hmm.
Um, and it's an indication to me that I'm not doing enough in the sales department.
Mm.
Uh, right? That maybe I've not been making offers or something where I'm giving, but the reciprocity isn't there.
Yes.
Um, right? And so that's always an indication to me, like, okay, this is out of balance, and I need to address it.
Yeah. It's
Um,
always a matter of balance, which is good
let's
for
go
them
and just
because they need to be able to give to you so they feel good about the transformation they receive.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've never done this, but I've seen people with like Patreon and other mechanisms where people can, like, there are certain things in my business where I want to share material free of charge.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and it may be part of my marketing efforts, and it may be part of me just serving people in that particular way. Um, but I have thought of, in those instances, should I have a like? I had someone Venmo me the other week,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
a nominal amount of money, a quote unquote, cup of coffee or glass of wine or something. She goes, last conversation, I was in this conversation with you, and it really served me, and I wanted to, buy a cup of coffee. So here it is, right?
That's
And it
beautiful.
was that exact thing of like that person wanted to reciprocate.
Hmm.
And so I think with, at a larger scale, really looking at, uh, am I giving and am I receiving? Is there reciprocal nature in what I'm doing, both, you know, working individually with clients perhaps, but also at a larger scale. And that's something I've toyed with is um, I have a philosopher friend who does all this work with Patreon, which is people being a patron of his work, basically, right?
Hmm.
Um, so uh, let's go to the next one. Separate and belong. How
This,
does this show up in adulthood?
okay. When it comes to becoming a couple, this right has been in one or the other or both in every couple I've ever worked with. This is kind of the core of attachment. This is. Um, it is a right to separate and go out and be a me and come back to be a we. A we. Now, most of us have been trained that by Maslow, what's at the top of the arc of self actualization? Physical safety, right to exist, other things like right to have your needs met. And at the top is self actualization. But we're not reptiles. We are mammals. We were born for a bond. The top, all of these rights were meant to give us a right to connect, to be a
Mm,
we. And where it
mm,
comes into play is you go out and be a me and you come back to the home port of somebody's heart. And when people are in the entrepreneurial circles, these are the people that they won't spend on coaching because that would be support, right? Or they won't. or they find people who they won't get the staff support to grow, or if they do, they will choose people who will not adequately support them. And or
Hmm.
sometimes it can be translated as an inability to be seen. Because remember, the little one, you got to get really grounded here. The little one's playing in a room, and they don't want you playing with their toys with you. They want to be me. But the moment you go and get coffee, like I did once with my son, there was a wah, and and I don't feel seen because every baby feels a little vulnerable. So when people say I don't feel seen, you can almost track it. That what that really means is I don't feel seen, where someone sees what I need and tries to support me. And that lack of support, that lack of being in a we that is cherishing and protecting. Those are the feelings that give us the right, and those are the ones that heal. If we can feel cherished and protected, cherish is literally seeing the essence of the other person. That's a little different than everybody else, and cherishing that little distinction that is just Jeffrey Van Dyke or whoever you are out there, whatever that is. It's seeing that essence and then wanting to protect it. This is the gateway to commitment. It is the gateway to loyalty. It is all those, and it is the gateway of we. Because when
I,
someone could be dating and they say, well, she's got this list or he's got this list, but that you can have fear of missing out on all day long. But the moment there's an essence, just the way they sing in the shower, the way they just, that little essence of them that you can't get elsewhere, this is when they are cherished. So someone really has to see your
hmm
essence. This is why the word seen,
hmm
I don't feel seen, comes up.
Yeah.
And seen and supported and cherished and protected all run in the same circle. They're all the benefits of being in a we, in a community, with the
So,
proper support, with the proper coaching.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go much more meta level for just a minute on this
Cool.
one. Uh, because I believe at a collective level, humanity is
Mm-hmm.
entering a new age of we.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that we've been in an I society, in an I world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before that, there was the we that had to, uh, you know, the I was diminished in service to the we,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So there's that version of a we, but I think there's a new we emerging, uh, where the I and the we get to cohabitate, right? Um, and that without this we, uh, I don't think our species will survive.
Exactly.
The I that is just out to be out for themselves is, we see the impacts and ramifications of that globally. We see it in the environment. We see it around racial justice. We see it around everything. But I do believe that there is a new we emerging, and that's what we are attempting to find our way into. And I think that as we do, so many of the systems we see as the foundations of our society are going to transform radically, because so many of the systems aren't built on a true we and I together system. Um, and I know I'm bringing us out into kind of
Oh
Never
no,
Never
that's
Land
fine. I
from.
mean, I love this because it does
Uh,
have much bigger ramifications. Now, there's another. You could have no right, all right to a we and no right to me. That's called codependent or enmeshed. It is an ebb and a flow, and you are right.
mhm.
The age of what Robert Bellow once called radical American individualism. He was a sociologist at Cal back in the 70s and 80s. Good a term as any. Radical. Where does individualism is a bankrupt thing? It's too much me. How do you create a good, what he called the good society? The good society.
Mhm.
How do you? What the I is literally tearing us apart, factioning. We go, more and more. I just want to have the news that says only what I want to hear. I just want people. And there's no listening to each other. We must be able to realize that we need each other. Most me today. Did you eat breakfast?
I did.
Did you grow the chicken for the eggs? Right.
Right. Yep.
Exactly. The whole thing. What about the supply? The trucker that drove it to the store. None of us self-actualize. If we think about it, we live in a cosmic we. The we of the plants. Right now, there are trees that just yesterday released some oxygen that I've breathed. That's being a good thing. And I do believe that if we don't see the collectiveness that we need each other to survive, to thrive, and to grow, not just survive, but to really grow. If we can get that, there's more power in a we. But what I've noticed is geopolitically, when there is a non-secure, what's called insecure attachment, people who don't have these rights, when you can't trust love, and this is what the right to be in a we is, you can trust it, then you will opt for power.
Uh-huh. And then we get authoritarianism.
And then we get authoritarianism. Take a good look at if I can mention his name over there in Putin. I mean, does that look like secure attachment to you? That looks like, to me, personality disorder. It's all,
Mm-hmm.
he's off in his own world. People saying he's, since COVID. Well, there's no, and what we does is all people that they don't have a right to be a me. They have to say what he says. And look where it gets us.
Yeah.
You know, the way forward to a better future is for us to realize we have so much in common. We need each other. We need each other.
This piece about people feeling cherished and protected. I'll come back to some of these and curious to examine some of them at a societal level in
Mhm.
addition to a individual level. But I have some thoughts about that I want to come back to. But first, let's go through the final three, and
Yeah.
then we'll come back to that. So we've got the right to exist, the right to have your needs met, the right to separate and belong. Then we have the right to create your own experience. What is
Yeah.
this?
I will tell you. I will also want to say, even at the Constitution, what does it say? We, the people, in order to create a more perfect union. The people knew about this, right? Hundreds of years ago, even geopolitically. But a right to create your own experience, you have to think about it. It comes right after you find out you're me. And then you get the experience. Well, who gets to be the standard of my experience? Do I get the right to create your experience comes on at the same time as about a right to assert. But it's the interior aspect of it. Do I get to create my experience, or does somebody else get to be the standard of it? And in
Give me
particular,
an
do I get to
example of
be
that.
all of my humanity, good and bad, strong and weak, all of it? Do I get to have all of it? And can I create it? And if we can't be fully human, if we can, or we're not allowed to be weak, little boys don't cry, or little girls don't play with tanks, or whatever the thing is, or you're going to make mommy look bad, or daddy wants you to be an all-star, or whatever the trip is. You don't get to access your full humanity. You won't be able to give others that access either.
So is
And
another way to say
therefore,
this,
intimacy is at stake.
yeah, is another way to say this, I get to explore and become my individual self,
You
express my
do.
individual nature. For
Mm-hmm.
example, as a little boy, apparently, uh, I was always humming. I was always making up melodies.
Mm.
Uh, I would just walk around all day long with these songs that I would make up. Usually I didn't have words, sometimes they did. But I remember when I finally left for college, my mom was like, "It's so quiet in this house. I'm just used to having this like humming happening, right?" Uh, so I was allowed to do that, right? I was allowed
Yes.
to create my own experience where in my world there are melodies and I hum them.
Yes.
And if I were told, shut up, stop humming, you know, be quiet, blah, 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 in this household, we fill in the blank, I would be told, oh, you don't get a right to create your own experience.
Exactly.
Am I
And for a
following?
man whose soul just released an album, this is coming from your soul. This is who you came to be. You're an artist, Jeffrey,
Hmm.
creating that. And if you had not been allowed to be that, when you cut back in one area, you cut back in all.
Say more about that.
You know, I always was impressed with something Brene Brown once said, that when you cut back on your pain, you cut back on your joy, right? And so this gives, it really is a full access to all of my potentialities, all of my gifts. This is all the access to your own experiences, everything that's within you. I am allowed to express. It is about the expressive self.
Hmm.
When you have a right to exist, you get to be a fully vested in your higher self, in all of yourselves, your bodily self. It's all about a right to be an expressive self of what's
Hmm.
unique and authentic. Um, when what I've noticed when I've worked with business people, right up your alley, is if they don't have a right to create their own experience, good luck marketing. They will struggle marketing because
Why?
some part is cut off from all of their genius, all of their and what's unique about them. They are being cut off from their own experience. How can you express? And you know, branding is all about it. The best branding comes from your soul, in my opinion,
Right.
right?
Yep.
You know, and if you don't have a full right to everything there, you can't access it all. You can't express it all.
Yeah. So I've also seen people that are actually decently successful at being copycats of other people. And
Yes.
they're decently successful because they hustle like mad. Um, but there's this soul missing in what they're up to. There's this signature aspect that it's like uh, there's no center here. There's no you here. Uh, so that's another way that I sometimes see this. Does that
Yeah, I
fit
mean,
in this
they may be
ballpark?
successful, they may make money, but are they being a thought leader?
Right. No.
Probably
No.
not.
No. No way at all.
They're living their life as a footnote to someone else's manuscript, so to
Uh huh.
speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's the whole concept of, you know, they don't get to have genius, real genius. And what you're
So
talking about
interesting.
in Courageous Messenger, Jeffrey, because I've heard you speak a number of times, is, I mean, you are dancing around the right to create your own experience so that others feel the feeling is empowered with choice.
Hmm.
If we are the feeling that heals and the feeling that the original rights, as I talk, they're all in at these rights are our left brain talking about an emotional state of feelings. The feelings are the rights. The rights are the feelings. There's no difference, right? And
What's the
if we feel
feeling that?
empowered, then that does good things.
So I know the right to exist, welcomed with joy,
Mhm.
needs met, worthiness, separate and belong is cherished and protected. What is it for create your own experience?
Empowered, empowered with
All right.
choice. I mean, and it's the right to, and I think it's choice. I debated with choice and voice. It could be choice and voice, but it's empowered with choice and voice.
Uh
And
huh.
this comes on at the same time, 12 months to 24 months. And the other experiences, just want to say, it's not like other experiences can't affect it. Like one client who was abducted at 13. That had a huge impact coming from a very secure family on her right to separate and belong, no longer as much right to separate, no longer feeling cherished and protected, and no longer feeling empowered. Doesn't like later experience can affect it, but the original right is, and then you have at the same time a right to take that interior experience where you're good with all of you. The narcissistic wound is an inability to be able to hold the good and bad at the same time.
Hmm.
As I say in my book, Safe to Love Again, it is a right to be flawed and fabulous. And you know where I found that beautiful phrase in the research? It was on a Dove bar in the 90s that I got out. And they used to have these things and it said you have a right to be you can be flawed and fabulous. And I realized and that's the best example of a right to create your own experience. But you also get a right to assert, which means to have voice. But there's something else. When you talked about sabotage early, people that sabotage, if that no is squashed, and there is a lot of especially punitive physical behavior, we are by nature free will creatures. And if we can't choose what we want, we will choose what we don't want. We will run to the bomb shelter of sabotage. And when that gets ingrained, they call it the masochistic wound because it's very tough because you only have a right to sabotage. I have to choose what I don't want. I would like to be happily married, but I'm on my fifth divorce. Or I don't know exactly why things were going good and I just decided to drop the coaching program. They sabotage. And
And this is from the Create Your Own Experience or Assertion?
they're coming in at the same time. They come in at the
Okay.
same, both from feeling welcome with joy, but they're slightly, and one's the interior, this is the exterior. When the expression outward, they can't choose what they want. They will sabotage. Um, And according to Wilhelm Reich, the year that Freud talked about Thanatos and Eros, he worked a whole year with a bunch of clients who had a missing right, what Reich would call to assert, which meant they were masochistic. And after that, Freud, I guess, according to Wilhelm, said he'd never work with anybody like that because they were too frustrating, because they kept sabotaging, his process. But whenever you see massive amounts of sabotage, I just can't get a win. People that pull the defeat from the jaws of victory, who are what you were saying. You recognize sabotage when you see it. It's some element of their wiring got to be. I can't choose what I want, so I will choose what I don't want. I had that one too. I mean, I hate saying it, but I was about headed into legal trouble when I was 15, just as a way of spiting my borderline mother. And luckily, an adult said, "Gary, you're smart. You got a future. Stop cutting your nose off to spite your mother's face."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the feeling that around assertion? To have a voice and be at choice?
Mm-hmm. It's there. It is. It is. It's the one. These two rights come in as the same feeling. I'm
Oh,
getting
so
some
empowerment
version.
with choice and voice.
Yes, empowered. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah,
Got
it's
it.
empowered. Yes, it's empowered to have a voice, to have a choice, and it's sometimes it's just voice. But if there's been hard physical abuse, some sort of physical level abuse, molestation will do it as well. Then that ability to say no, that ability to choose, and then they choose what they don't want.
So let me ask you about this because one of the things that I've seen, and when I'm working with people on kind of their own hero's journey,
Hmm.
um, Donald Miller, one of my favorites, is he says victims heal into heroes, and heroes strengthen into guides when we move from victim to hero to guide.
Hmm.
Um, to me, there's a lot of the healing work that goes when we move out of our victim stories into uh, moving towards the challenge, showing up in life, being the hero. And he defines hero as simply a victim in the process of transformation.
Yeah.
Uh, but then there's this other place of strengthening into being a guide. And what I find for a lot of people who are really stepping into their life's work, right? They're gifted and they've have probably had a great business and done really well and this and that and the other thing. But then there's this culmination of everything they've done and built.
Hmm.
And a lot of them, that's when often work with people is to help them really craft what that is and what the story of their life's work is and who needs it and why and all that sort of stuff. There's often this place of, oh crap, if I really step out with this, it could be big. I feel the power of it. I feel the potential impact of it. And a lot of the place I have to work with people is on getting clear about the boundaries that need to be in place, the conditions that need to be set for them to say yes to the next phase of their journey. Just did this earlier today with somebody. Because the fear is, if this really blows up, my life will implode in one way,
Yeah.
shape, or form, right? Uh, and part of that foundationally is, do I get to say no? Do I get to assert my boundaries? Do
Yes.
I get to be clear about who gets to be in my world and who doesn't, and under which conditions? Uh, do I get to say no to uh, even potentially big gigs? I remember the first time I said no to somebody joining a mentorship program that was $25,000 and that I was running. And I was like, am I going to say no to 25K? And my answer was, yes, I am, because this is going to cost me more than 25K because the person wasn't appropriate for the program. So
Yes.
is this all around these two rights?
It can be, boundaries work is certainly a part of this. A lot of times you do boundary, the ability to say no, right? Because it comes in at that ties. There's another aspect that I've learned in my own journey, and it's the story we tell. It's the story we tell. Slightly different from what you teach. Mary Main did some work on and attachment circles, and they something called the adult attachment inventory. But what she noticed is that the way people tell their story, and this was almost beyond belief, predicts the attachment style of their children with 85% accuracy. And you can track this effect of stories for up to 6 generations. Now, the function of memory isn't to remember the past as much as it is to predict the future. At first, if I can remember that red berry will kill me, then I can predict in the future that's what will happen. And what I work with my clients is around this right to assert. It's a right to create your own experience. Whatever story you're telling you is telling your brain to have more of it. We all have our stories. And one of the most life-changing moments for me is when I realized that this victim story wasn't working. It was disempowering me. A lot of therapy encourages victim stories. Better, more subtle, just a little few more extra terms. And what I've found is that, I live in a cosmic we. And if I'm going to go to that next bigger phase, I am trusting that we, so it goes kind of back there, that it has prepared me, that I am being guided, that if I need more wattage, there's more than just me, Jeffrey. I'm tapped into an empowering universe, a cherishing universe. And I trust that every time I've reached out for the universe and I've said, I'd like to do something bigger, the universe reaches back. I know when we reach for the stars reach back because it's a mirroring universe, not rewarding, not punishing. It's mirroring. And the universe wants to have our back. I truly feel I live in a cosmic we. I really do. I can still remember years and years ago going to being a part of a transformational leaders group. And when I'm seeing all these people that are playing a bigger game to me, I went back the first night to my room, and about 10:30 at night, I said to the universe, I don't know how to get there, but I need to play at that level. Show me. And 2 months later, I get a call from the Great Love Debate saying, we'd like you to show up at several shows across the country. Bingo. And from there, I was like, okay, now I'm going to find out how all this works.
Yeah.
That's, but there's a part of me that tells a very different story. See, before having been I used to tell a story with a borderline mother who rejected me over and over and eventually wouldn't talk to me the last 13 years of her life. I don't belong. Oh, no, I do. I belong to all sorts of people's hearts, just not a few that has genes in common with me. Elton John and, well, what's her name, have a song, that's all about, it's not about our genes, our belonging. Belonging, you can belong and feel empowered in a cosmic we. And for me, I am always listening for where the universe wants to send me. And I couldn't hear that voice when I didn't have a missing right to exist. I couldn't hear it when I was too busy worried about not belonging. The more I cleared up my rights, the more I could hear the universe, and we could vibe off each other, and I can create more and more messaging and structures. And there is something called secure attachment with the universe. Einstein was right when he said the most important question you're ever going to answer is whether this is a friendly or a hostile universe. And when the universe has your back, I just know guides show up, and there's some are cleverly disguised as Jeffrey Van Dyke. Some are other people,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. That's so been my experience as I've grown and I think installed some of these rights over time. My ability to partner with the universe,
Yes.
to really be in that dance, has grown exponentially, and to trust it, to lean in. You know, um, let's just go to this last one: the right to love and be loved back. What's this one about?
This is the one that comes on to 24 and 36. And you see it kind of like it's the opening. When people come to me, it's almost the opening right that's missing. I have more right to love than to be loved back. Somewhere when the brain gets enough cognitive development, the prefrontal cortex starts coming online, and it starts adding up the feelings, so to speak, the rights. It's doing more emotional calculation, but it's the same thing. And then it says, do I have all these rights? Do I have all these feelings? And it comes out to be the right to love and be loved. And I can tell you that if it's missing, it's like sushi. It will take on the flavor of whatever particular missing ingredient is underneath it. So it's like sushi. It will be a little different for someone having a missing right to assert than a missing right to have their needs met or a missing right. This comes into the entrepreneurial world as a right to have a raving fan club. I noticed it the first time when a woman was referred to me many, many years ago because she had stage fright. And where did this go down to? The moment I had two of them show up at about the same time. I guess the universe was trying to point me to see the bigger picture. For both of them, whenever they were seen by a parent, they would get in trouble or get beat. So when their brain, when they're on stage, doesn't see 40 audience members, 100 audience members, it sees 40 or 100 muggers, right? So I began to notice the one got on stage and she had stage fright. You could see, but she was on stage, and she got a standing ovation for something she said the last 2 minutes, and she ran off, couldn't take it in, because she did. And I also knew she had more right to give love than to be given back. So it's a full right to be lovable, to be loved just for who you are, and to have some raving fan club. I once was speaking, and I got a standing ovation. And a friend of mine, she said to me, she goes, "You like getting a standing ovation?" I said, "You darn straight I do." I could take it in. And if I didn't, that's cool too. But it's the ability to bring in all of that it's okay to be loved and lovable, to be appreciated for who you are. Now, the way it gets split, this one gets split too. People get more right to love than to be loved. The narcissistic version is I can get loved more than I give love. It can also be split between, you can see it when someone says, how come the hot ones and the good ones can't be in the same package? Where they can have sex but not partnership, passion but not partnership. So this one gets split in several different ways emotionally, or it can be online later on sexually. And it's a full right to be in partnership, to have passion. And can you imagine? And that's passion, partnership. Is this not what we do as entrepreneurs? Is
Right.
this not what we do as thought leaders? We have to partner with people with passion. And I like to think of it, the higher end version is that we are, we're able to receive the passion of others. I mean, what was it? And Jeffrey, it was about 4 weeks ago, woke up, everybody wakes up in the mornings. Well, some Monday morning, and I was just feeling like a little down. And then I just happened to hear your little podcast, the little Monday message thing. And it was just what I needed to hear,
Yeah.
that you don't know, the universe just sends you. And I go, perfect,
Yep.
just, and this is what it means that we are. And I got a little bit of your passion,
Yeah.
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 And here we are. This is a partnership, what we're doing,
Yeah.
and this obviously goes back to right to separate and belong. Hard to not to. If you don't have that, this one goes away. This one goes away.
Yeah.
It gets split too.
What's the
Yeah.
feeling people need to have to experience the right to love and be loved back?
Lovable. Unlovable. Not for my looks, not for my brains, not for my
Yep.
body. The biggest gift that I have been given is I used to think the only thing that made me worthy was my intelligence. The only thing that validated my experience. These days, what I was gifted with intellectually is not me. It's a tool. It's a gift. It's not Gary.
Mm-hmm.
There is such freedom in this
Mm-hmm.
feeling of
Mm-hmm.
lovability.
Mm-hmm.
And if I go out and fail, it doesn't mean my whole existence. It means, there's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you can be more gracious with yourself and with others. And with others. I always try to give these feelings to everybody I encounter, whether it's the barista at Starbucks or the person checking me out at Whole Foods, and especially all my friends. How can I give them these 4 feelings of welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered? If you give them, they always feel lovable. The 5th one's a bonus.
I
It's a free
love it. I
tag
love it.
card.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful place for, I think, us all to go, oh, I can share these with the world, these 4 feelings, right? I can share these 4. Go over them one more time, Gary.
Welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered. And if you're in a partnership, track it. Track
What
it.
was the last one?
If you're in a relationship, track the 4 feelings. Don't ask what went wrong. Just ask your partner, which of these feelings didn't you feel? What made you feel that way? If you're dating and you're single, then you simply are tracking the feelings. Do I feel welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered? And if not, if it can't be fixed, then you move on. But I teach all my couples to do a check-in and ask, 9 to 10, how do you feel? Right? And then if they something, how was I doing as your partner? If it's less than 9, then you ask the second question is, so which of the feelings is missing? If we could, Jeffrey, if we can track these 4 feelings that we give to everybody, if we could get more people to do that, we could change the world. And they're simple. Anybody can. My favorite story ever was I was working with a couple. They had a 3 and a 5-year-old. And they asked me how they could teach their children these 4 feelings. And so I gave them, I just happened to have for an event, coffee cups that had the 4 feelings listed: welcomed, worthy, cherished, and empowered. I said, do sippy cups at supper. And one week talk about empowered, one week and talk about cherished, one welcomed, and one worthy, right? And they did that for about 6 months. And this is just the most beautiful story. So one day the 3 and the 5-year-old are playing together. And the 3-year-old, being a 3-year-old, takes a truck and whacks the 5-year-old across the head with the truck. And the 5-year-old says, I don't feel very cherished and protected. You can't, I mean, imagine when these two grow up and they're tracking these feelings with the people they love.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought that's my favorite client story of all time.
I love it. But I can imagine the same exact thing
Yeah.
in a business context going,
Yes.
oh, I don't feel very cherished and protected right now, right? My partner's company just got acquired. So
Hmm.
he's a vice president, right? But a lot of people in change like that don't feel necessarily cherished or protected. That
No.
those are things that can be attended to in a leadership context as well. Um,
Imagine if
I just love that.
co-founders. Imagine if
What's that?
co-founders. Imagine if co-founders. Co-founders are rife with
Yeah.
conflict. They happen to get into a lot of conflict, just like couples, right?
Right.
Because they're not tracking the feelings. They're just tracking the business. The feelings are running everybody's attachment. This is how all of our brains are wired. This is our natural GPS. It's emotional, not logical. If we are tracking these four feelings and we are finding ways to give it to ourselves and others, we cannot help but create a more thought changing, paradigm changing people. If we're going to be a paradigm changer, my paradigm I'd like to change is everybody think in terms of four feelings and how do I give them, how do I receive them? We would
Beautiful.
change the world with that paradigm.
Beautiful.
Because
I'm on
these
board, my
four
friend.
feelings come from the earliest, it's your brain's earliest GPS. It will always use them as its reference for love. And this happens for every relationship. They track and they go elsewhere. They grow legs. If we're going to change the world, Jeffrey, it's just four feelings away from a way better, more loving, more conscious world. Because when we run these four feelings, it makes it safe for consciousness to evolve. Otherwise, we get sucked down into survival and power.
There we have it.
Yeah.
Dr. Gary Salyer, thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff.
Where to find more information about you? If people want to get in touch, where can they do that?
All they have to do is go to GarySalyer.com and, all
Easy
that
peasy.
other.
And your book is
Safe to Love Again, how to release the pain of past relationships and create the love you deserve.
awesome. My
Yes.
friend, thank you as always. It's such a delight, and we've never actually taken the time to tease these apart.
No.
I find it so fascinating to look at all of them, but then to go down to these four basic feelings that any one of us can track and be a part of and help install in our own lives and the lives of those we serve. So thank you for being here, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.